What if your waking life is also a dream? And what if lucid dreaming held the key to mastering waking life? Blending Neville Goddard's teachings with neuroscience and mystical practice, Shveta explores why becoming aware is not the same as becoming the author, and why so many of us, even seasoned conscious creators, still feel surprised, stuck, or confused by our reality. You'll learn how dreams mirror your unconscious patterns, why everyone is you pushed out, and how that still applies even when you're shocked by what you see. If you've ever felt like you know the teachings, but still wonder why your outer world does not fully reflect your inner work, this is the conversation that connects the missing dots. To go deeper, join the School of Imagination on Discord. The invite link is in the video description. And if you're ready to train as a reality author and learn the mechanics of the reality simulation through a deep dive into simulation mastery, consider joining our next live cohort of Brave Mystic training, starting soon. Link is in the description. Let's begin this journey into the logic of dreams, the mystery of states, and the power of remembering who is really writing the script. This is DreamLogic.
So, everyone, welcome back to DreamLogic. And this is episode 10 of a series that we've been doing. And it just was a series based off of a hunch I had that the mechanics of lucid dreaming, which were getting more and more attention, and there's all kinds of practitioners and scientific research and real neuroscience to back this up. The world of lucid dreaming had fascinating parallels to how we live our lives in this shared dream construct. As Neville would put it, we live together and we're dreaming in concert. And so that thought experiment and exploration led me to looking through the literature of lucid dreaming, both sort of informal first person accounts and the literature by researchers and neuroscientists on the matter, and start to map that out to what Neville said about the different layers and levels of the dream world we live in, the different states of awareness that get us there, and see if we could glean anything. Because when lucid dreamers who decide, instead of every night me going to sleep and not remembering these fantastical visions that I create, I not only am I going to remember that I'm dreaming at the moment and try to remember my dreams more in the waking state, I'm also going to try to control the dream. I'm also going to try to control the contents of the dream. And they're confident they can do that because lucid dreamers know that this is just a temporary expression of material within their consciousness. It's just an expression of material within their consciousness. That doesn't make the dream automatically less scary or easier to control, but they kind of put two and two together there, that every night when I close my eyes and I enter this dream state, what's creating is within my imaginal self. It's everything coming from all of the deeper versions of myself. And throughout this series, we've been exploring Neville's understanding of dreams, how he saw waking reality as a dream, his hotel room lucid experience, and his revision technique and how it applies to the science of lucid dreaming and dream editing. We've covered all kinds of things like dream stabilization, the true distinction between ordinary dreams and deliberate imagination, Neville's teachings about controlled versus uncontrolled fourth dimensional thinking, and all kinds of techniques. We've adapted lucid dreaming techniques that practitioners use to gain more lucidity and more control over their dream, we've adapted them to waking, our waking reality, and seeing how it might impact that. And I want to get closer to completing what I started, which I started 12 weeks ago. That thought experiment and the desire I had, a sort of a research project desire. I want to start to complete and close out what we started there. And last week, I there was some material from last week that I didn't get to cover within that hour, specifically about the mechanics of lucid dreams, how that connects to the state akin to sleep, and then continuing to go through the research on on lucid dreaming and maybe potentially shared dreaming that might help to illuminate Neville's idea that we're dreaming in concert, because this is something that I think has stumped the broader manifestation community, because so much of this does, when you look at it, there's a lot of cognitive dissonance that can come. Not only are we one, but we are many. Not only are we infinite, but we also experience finite in our reality, our 3D reality. And so when we start to understand that we're dreaming in concert, yet everything is you pushed out, those can be pretty difficult ideas to contend with. But applying what we start to explore when we look at lucid dreaming to this can really help start to map it out a little more and maybe understand more about how this reality can be both a dream and have the continuity it has, and have the system and structure that it has. And in Brave Mystic training, which we're in cohort 2 right now, we're going deep into the mechanics through taking that simulation lens. And with this series in the radio hour, I've been wanting to take that lucid dreaming lens of taking the dream state to sort of map out the terrain of consciousness that we live in this waking reality. I also want to explore some unique patterns that show up consistently in lucid dreaming research that directly seem to parallel how we believe we create our waking reality. We're all here because we're taking this theory seriously that Neville put out, or the truth that he put out, that our reality is projected based on our state, our I am state, our identity, who we claim ourselves to be. And this idea that our expectation of what are an assumption determines possibility, and this idea that lucid dreamers are exploring within dreams, where they're saying, okay, I'm going to start to remember more of who I am and try to control the dream now. We're going to that whole exploration has so much gold in it. And I wanted to say before we get in as well, because I tend to get really deep, is that next week will actually be our final DreamLogic episode for this season. And part of that reason is I want to close this out to a place where it's like an initial exploration. We put a little timestamp on it that we started exploring this, and using this as research material and notes to start off with. But I want to pivot to giving more of myself to the Brave Mystic training that Josiah and I are a part of. So I want to give, and I also want to give everything we've learned here time to integrate for myself, and then also with the cohort too. And so next week we'll close it out. We'll synthesize the main points of the episodes, give you a consolidated practice guide, so you kind of have a 1 to 2 sheet, sort of so what now? What do I do next? And how do I make this happen in my life? Sort of consolidating all the techniques we've talked about. And then also sharing a little about what's shifted in my own experience so far. But today, let's start with what I didn't get to last week, which is the exact mechanics of wake-initiated lucid dreams. So that's WILD. That's the short form for WILD, wake-initiated lucid dream. In lucid dreaming research, there are 2 main paths to becoming lucid. Dream-initiated lucid dreams, where you become aware during an ongoing dream, and wake-initiated lucid dreams, what researchers call WILD, where you maintain consciousness while transitioning directly from awaking into the dream state. WILD happens during that drowsy transition period when you're falling asleep. And researchers have discovered about brain activity that during this transition, your brain starts to move through very specific and measurable wave patterns, beta waves. Beta waves are associated with active analytical thinking, and they give way to alpha waves. And alpha waves are more of the relaxed awareness. Start to get it more relaxed. After alpha, then you move into theta waves, which is deep creativity and memory processing. And when you're in delta waves, you're in deep sleep. When you're in that deep, almost dreamless sleep, there's a dreamless sleep, that you go to every night, and those are in the delta waves. The key finding is that the theta stage is when something really important happens. During theta, your brain becomes highly plastic and receptive to new patterns, while your critical, analytical mind becomes less active. And around this time, this is the state where memory consolidation happens, where your brain is literally reorganizing the day's experience and integrating them with long term memory patterns. Every night, it's taking the day's experiences and your long term memory patterns and integrating them, which maps out, at least from, excuse me for a second. This maps almost perfectly onto what Neville called state akin to sleep, SATS, where he discovered experientially that this drowsy transitional state was optimal for what he called, imaginal scenes, create an imaginal act, all of his techniques. And I mentioned last week that he considered deliberate imagining controlled fourth dimensional thinking. So when we go to sleep every night, and we go into that dream state, that theta wave dream state that we fall into every night, Neville called that uncontrolled fourth dimensional thinking. But when we go there deliberately by getting ourselves to a very relaxed state, intentionally getting into theta state, he called that controlled fourth dimensional thinking. He said, the state akin to sleep is the natural doorway to the subconscious. In this state, the conscious and subconscious are creatively joined. In plain terms, state akin to sleep is the state where your conscious intention can directly influence your subconscious programming. And I think we know that by now, that's why so many New Thought teachers and Neville himself spoke to this state, that state akin to sleep, as being the doorway to our consciousness. And current research on WILD, the wake-initiated lucid dreams, reveals why the state is so powerful. Lucid dreaming research also gives some crucial refinements to start to help us when we practice this state akin to sleep. Because studies show that the most successful wild dreams, so wake-initiated lucid dreams, happen when people maintain that relaxed intention. Relaxed intention, where you need enough awareness to direct your focus, but not so much mental effort that you keep yourself awake. So you still need that awareness to direct your focus, but you're relaxed enough that you don't have to be fully awake. Kind of ties to why Neville emphasized that state akin to sleep should feel effortless and natural, but you're not falling asleep. You're still controlling it yourself. And he essentially was sharing that this idea of entering that state is, it can be hard because you can fall asleep. So he recommended practicing it. But that state akin to sleep is that theta state, that optimal theta state that even lucid dreaming researchers have found that is the state where you can retain lucidity while starting to gain authorship. The research also shows that wild, wake-initiated lucid dreams are more successful when people use what's called the witness perspective. The witness perspective is when you have a subtle awareness that you're transitioning into a dream state without getting caught up in the content of emerging dream imagery. This witness perspective, I thought that was really interesting. And I see that it sort of aligns to Neville's instruction to feel yourself into the situation of your answered prayer. You have that detachment, but you feel yourself into the situation of your answered prayer, and you're kind of engaging with the imaginal content. And a lot of what Neville shared, he's like, he talked about how a lie, if told enough times, can harden into a truth. And he wasn't talking about a lie in a nefarious way. He was talking about almost like a noble lie where you deny what you see with your five senses and assert the supremacy of your imagination. And so, what he's talking about there, when we think of the witness perspective, I find that useful to say, okay, I witness this and I decline and deny what I'm witnessing, and I choose to witness something different. I choose to assert the supremacy of my imaginal act. And if you do that in theta wave state, that's what the research is showing, you're able to guide that. You're able to like guide that experience more so that it goes into that memory consolidation part of your brain where it turns into a memory. And that's really important here is I've learned over the years how important imaginal acts and affirmations, they need to seep into your memory for them to really feel like a part of you. You know, our moment to moment observations and our moment to moment perception of the world around us is influenced by what's in our memory bank. Even if we're not thinking of our memories all the time, they are still stored in our consciousness. And so I see that revision and edit and imaginal acts and that editing part, like of when we're starting to review our day and edit the last, the various things in our life that we would like to prune. When we start to do that, for it to really take, this is kind of my experience, they need to be consolidated in memory. So really the takeaway here is in the research of lucid dreaming, they've started to see that the best state to retain awareness and create lucidity and author your dream is in that theta wave state where you still have that memory activated and it consolidates your memory. And so hopefully this is more encouragement. This has been huge encouragement for me to go back into practicing the state akin to sleep. So many times, and I'm a pretty traditional Neville student, even though I explore all these other frameworks. You know, I use revision every single day. I use my imaginal ears for manifestation like techniques. Those are my imaginal ears. Use all my senses. I feel into the feeling. I do that on a daily basis with various things. And so when I think now, okay, now I have even more of a motivation and inspiration to include that a deeper like sleepy state into my techniques. So when I was earlier, I was listening to something like one of the tools that I teach about in Brave Mystic training. I was listening to something and feeling the reality of something, but I wasn't as much of in a sleepy state as I could have been. And the research is showing, just like Neville said so many years ago, that sleepy state is where you have a very effective way to sort of sink in to your subconscious mind. It's that doorway through memory consolidation. And of course, as I'm going through this, if there's anything that sticks out to you or you have any questions about some of the research I'm sharing, please do share. Because next week is our final class in the series, or the final radio hour rather in the series. I'd love to see what I can dig up for you in research and connect the dots if you have any questions. Studies also show that people who successfully initiate lucid dreams from the waking state, they often report a specific feeling, and they call it sinking into or dissolving into that imagined scene. So those that are starting to initiate lucid dreaming from the waking state, so that wild technique, what they're doing there is very similar to what we're doing, where we're imagining a scene and we're being deliberate about our imagination. They're doing it to influence their dream world. We're doing this to influence our waking world. And I notice that the deeper I go into state akin to sleep without falling asleep, that's my biggest difficulty with state akin to sleep, is that I can tend to fall asleep a little too quickly before I've really saturated that scene within me. And it's that sinking into and dissolving into experience that's where that control mechanism is. So you can sink in without falling asleep. That's what lucid dreamers have to do, is feel that sinking in without falling asleep. And that boundary between imagining the experience or like being in your 3D world and being in the experience starts to disappear. So the other thing I wanted to share here is the focus on consistency. So research on lucid dreams reveals why consistency matters so much. And studies show that people who practice the same technique in lucid dreaming regularly develop what researchers call lucid dream programming. Their brain learns to reorganize and enter the lucid state more easily over time. And so this reminded me of what an old coach used to tell me, and many coaches have said different things to me over the years, but this coach had a really good point. She would recommend having a routine every day. And having this routine every day where you wake up and you do an imaginal scene, and every night you go to sleep, before you go to sleep, you do, some revision. And then throughout the day, you had like little bursts of, meditations and imaginal acts that you would infuse, maybe gratitude. She recommended this routine, and people, as people do, had all kinds of different reactions to it. The reaction was, that's helpful. This is how I can incorporate it into my day, and that works with my lifestyle. And of course, plenty of others were like, that seems like a lot of work. That also seems like this is supposed to be easier. If I'm God, if I'm infinite, shouldn't this be easier? And I have flip-flopped with either side in my journey. There's times where I'm very consistent and I see the value of a routine, and there's times where I want to throw my hands up and say, I kind of want to be done with this and just live my life and not need to stick to this. But having explored the lucid dreaming research, the consistency aspect is so important if you want to be successful here. Because researchers call that consistency, the benefit of that consistency, they call it out because the brain learns more and more easily to enter that lucid state over time, to recognize and enter that lucid state over time. That's really a Neville emphasis too, that persistence and repetition. His emphasis on persisting. When you practice the same state akin to sleep technique, it doesn't have to necessarily be the same scene, but perhaps it's at the same time every night. Perhaps it's consistent enough to be every day that we're doing state akin to sleep. And that way, we're not just hoping for results or just using it when, things hit the fan, like when things go wrong. That used to be an old version of me, and I've learned my lesson the hard way, where only when things were really chaotic in my life, and I was about to lose a job or a friendship, or I was about to lose incredibly important things to me, would I then, remember who I am and start to try to clean up my act here through imagination. And I became really good at that. I became really good at putting myself in really bizarre situations and then getting out like without like a scratch, with my relationships intact. And I realized that became a sort of consistency and pattern of its own. And I feel that I want to take the spirit of consistency that this lucid dreaming research is pointing to, that Neville was pointing to, and bring back persistency. When the shoulds hit the fan. You're funny, Ariel. Yeah, I hope this is encouraging for one, consistency. Two, what I was saying earlier about the state akin to sleep, like encouraging. Really, this is encouraging me to fundamentals with Neville, to go back to the fundamentals with Neville, which I find absolutely fascinating. Just as lucid dreamers learn to consciously enter and navigate dream realities, you can learn to consciously enter and navigate desired identity states. If they can do it, we can absolutely do it too, especially with the community that we have and the now so the documentation that's starting to be done. Over the last several years, Neville's work has become sort of reinvigorated in the online community, of course, especially during 2020. There was a huge boom in people looking for Neville's teachings. And I think that's because people are starting to experiment with it more and start just that includes struggling with it more. One thing I have to note, and I note this often, that there are all kinds of communities sprouting online that are really struggling with these teachings, and either they don't believe them anymore, and they feel they've lost years to these teachings and these belief systems, or they don't think they can ever get there even if they do believe in them. And it's a really, there is some backlash here. So there's experimentation being done, and then this shows, there's tons of success, and there's a ton of people hitting the wall here. And that is true for lucid dreaming too. In fact, there's still people who refuse to believe that lucid dreaming is even real, even though there's science to back it up. The very fact that it's difficult, and also the fact that we're talking about the area of consciousness. Consciousness is really, has eluded us in terms of, like, from a scientific angle, to really be able to define, study, and understand it. Of course, different fields exist, but it's something that still beguiles all kinds of so-called experts in the field and those of us that are trying to better understand it. So there's a lot to be said there. If you can consciously enter and navigate desired identity states, just like lucid dreamers can, because the skills are the same: maintaining relaxed awareness, engaging with the senses sensually with imaginal experiences, and developing the confidence to treat those experiences as real when they're happening, without, like, almost like a witness, like you're a witness to your own creation. Okay. Now I have something kind of spicy, I have to say. And because this is where I like to go to mainstream science to start, and then I'm open to fringe science, where skeptics will raise their eyebrows and people are not as open, because there's more burden of proof. And I have to say, in science, it's fair to say that there is a burden of proof if you want to, overthrow any existing way of looking at it, the existing worldview. And I just want to be clear here. What I'm going to share here is controversial. It's still really preliminary, but I'm excited to see how we how this connects with Neville's experience and teaching of dreaming in concert. So, research into what scientists call mutual dreaming, or shared dreaming experiences, and how it relates to Neville's deeper understanding of that dreaming in concert with others. There's a small but growing body of research into the shared dreaming that is preliminary and controversial, but some studies have documented cases where two or more people report having remarkably similar dream experiences on the same night, sometimes including specific details that weren't discussed beforehand. Dr. Stanley Krippner's work at Saybrook University has documented numerous cases of what appears to be telepathic or shared elements in dreams. The mechanisms aren't well understood, but the phenomena have been reported consistently enough to warrant investigation. Now, this research becomes much more significant when you understand the full depth of what Neville taught about this shared dream construct. He didn't just say we're sharing a collective reality, he kind of taught something much more radical. In his lecture, He Dreams in Me, Neville said that before entering this world, we made an agreement. He stated, "In the beginning, we all agreed to dream in concert, and no one has ever violated that agreement." Think about what that means. According to Neville, this isn't accidental. We're not randomly bumping into each other in separate dreams. We deliberately agreed to share the same dream, so our individual experiences would fit together coherently. In the Gospel, Neville put it even more directly. He said, "You and I agreed to dream in concert, and this world is our dream." He taught that before what he called the fall, so before divine consciousness descended into human limitation, the Elohim, the gods, agreed to dream together. In What is His Name, in that lecture, Neville says that the Elohim hurled themselves into their creation, and they agreed to dream in concert, so the whole world would be a dream in concert. This wasn't a mistake or punishment, according to Neville. In the lecture The Way, Neville writes, "We agreed to dream in concert, to fall into these states, and then come out of these states having experienced them." every state of limitation we experience is part of this shared dream, and we will eventually awaken enriched by the experience. Now, why does this matter practically? To me, it was interesting because it explains something really important that can often get us a little stressed out. Why reality changes sometimes happen gradually, more gradually than we'd like. Because when we start to change our internal state, we're not just editing a solo dream. You think of it like you are proposing an edit to a shared dream. The other dreamers have input, but remember here, first of all, the other dreamers are you. And you all agreed to dream together. So it's almost like when you are imagining something, especially when you're imagining an edit that would affect the shared mutual dreamers, right? When you're doing that, you're not just editing your solo dream, it's almost like proposing an edit to a shared dream, like a shared document where other dreamers have input, but they're also you. You're on the same team, and you all agreed to dream together. There's a coherence and a harmony that needs to be maintained in the shared dream. In the lecture, This World is a Dream, Neville illustrated this story about friends imagining success for an unemployed man. He said that whether it's one person or many who imagined it, that it would work because they all dream in concert. He used a musical metaphor. He said, if many people imagine the same outcome, they're playing in concert like an orchestra. He said, if I go to a concert and there are 100 pieces and they're all playing in concert, don't let one get out of beat. Don't let one get off the tone. Let them all play in concert. He also said, if we love each other, we can dream in concert. And I thought that was quite simply put, but it felt almost like it felt almost like he was saying, well, obviously we love each other, so of course we can dream in concert. And that kind of sometimes feels like the opposite of sometimes this shared dream construct. That it's born out of love, you know? The separation doesn't always feel like it's born out of love. But what he's saying here is when friends genuinely agree that someone is gainfully employed, that their collective assumption brings about the employment, that's love. And that's choosing to dream in concert. That's choosing to take that dream in concert and actually play it in its full expression. Me read some chats. So Hugo, I see your request for things to research next time. Hugo says, one topic for possible research that I would love is nonverbal awareness in the context of dreams and lucid dreams. Entering the silence, we could have that mean directing one's attention towards sensory things. But what about sensory thoughts then? Abstractions, experiential data, intellectual activity. You know what? You said, hope this isn't too obscure. Hugo, this is interesting that you say that because it is true that in each of our consciousness mind, like we have things that are easy to explain, like when you use your language, like I was having this thought, and you tell someone the thought. But so much of our consciousness are like you said, nonverbal, experiential. They might not happen in words. Maybe they're happening in colors or multisensory ways. So I fully see where you're coming from there. And what you said about nonverbal awareness reminded me of some research I've been doing on how people who are blind or deaf, how they dream and what is their dream experience. And that has really astonished me. So yeah, I think that's really cool. Thank you for asking that. And we can start to put some pieces together there because you are right. So much of consciousness is abstractions. I mean, that's why dreams are so abstract, you know? It's an expression of our consciousness, and there's information there, but it's not always straightforward. Josiah says, I love challenging people's paradigms. I live on the edge. Yes. And by the way, Josiah, that's why you do the work that you do. Because that's the job. That's your role in this reality. And that's the role I play as well. Ariel says, these shared dreams remind me of how many similar ideas and innovations can show up on various parts of the world at the same time. Or when you make up a word and it turns out it already exists. Yes. No. Oh, yes. The shared dreams. Exactly. Yes. So that's like, parallel thinking and, sort of like idea space, ideas kind of coming through in multiple channels through multiple people. That certainly happens in science and in art. Um, Super cool. Hugo says, like a metaphysical council electing reality, proposing ontology and dream content and voting on it, with the truth ultimately coming into being as an elect state. I love that. That's really, that feels so right, like, or that feels so structurally sound there. Um, because we all agree to dream in concert and we're all one, and no one usurps the other, really. Um, and we're voting on it through our actions and reactions at any given moment, through just who we claim ourselves to be, to what we assume as true, what we accept as true. That's our voting. What we accept as true at any given moment, and how much we remember in each moment. Josiah says, Kathy, do you have a question? Oh yes, we can bring you up. Yes, I saw that. I wasn't sure if that was a mistake. Um, yeah. Hugo says, this reminds me a lot of Rupert Sheldrake morphic resonance. Yes, it states that if rats learn how to navigate a maze in Australia, they will also solve it more quickly in England, the field of species connecting them. Apparently, this holds true in experiments, which is incredible. Yes, these are morphogenetic fields. And this is something we explore in detail and experiment with in Brave Mystic training. So, cohort 2 has a lot to get excited about, but we've covered some of this with cohort 1 as well. Okay. So going back to the mutual dreaming research, studies show that people who are emotionally close to, or who meditate together regularly are more likely to report shared dream elements. The research is catching up to what Neville taught, that consciousness is more interconnected than our individualistic worldview assumes. When we're aligned in love and shared intention, we can edit that shared dream with more clarity and more powerfully. And we can edit more and more of that shared dream. But here's kind of like a compassionate insight that this brought to me. If everyone here agreed to dream in concert, agreed to dream together, then everyone we encounter, even and especially the difficult people, they agreed to be here with you. They're playing their part in the shared dream. And I feel that this mutual dreaming research and sort of how it connects to the dreaming in concert teaching that Neville shared, it fosters compassion in me, more compassion on a daily basis. That we share this world with each other and we are each other. We chose to dream together. And while we can have boundaries, we can decide what's right for us in our storyline. We can choose to have various nodes and experiences around us over others. We can have preferences. We can also continue to recognize that every other node in the shared dream is reflecting aspects of the collective dream back to us. And this has practical implications for us as Neville students, for our imaginal work. So, for example, when several people deliberately imagine the same outcome for someone, it kind of starts to hint that their imaginal acts are more effective. And let's kind of think about the dream in concert, orchestra example. When you are in an orchestra, there are powerful solo performers. And those powerful solo performers are very well heard and make an impact, with all of the other instruments deciding to quiet down for that instrument to take center seat. So to me, that shows that you don't need more than one node to edit reality. There's no need, because there are solo parts you can play, and a solo makes an arrangement of music sound divine. It's needed. And the concert itself, the orchestra, works together in ways, and so it makes sense to me that if we start to align ourselves with the other creators, especially the ones that we share this dream world with, and the ones that are, in calls like this every week, and doing practices like the ones that we talk about every week, that we start to align. We start to share the dream. We can perhaps start to dream together. And I have to say, it's wild that I'm bringing this up because me and my mom, we have done collective imaginal acts plenty of times, and of course Josiah and I do collective imaginal acts, and this is something I have done before, but it starts to make sense why the imaginal scenes I've done, especially with my family, have those seeds have been so powerful and layered, and they have the soul signature of both my mom, me, and just everyone that's in that field. And so I see this as an encouraging point for us to take away that who in our reality can we start to share our imaginal acts with and to take this orchestration to the next level? Are there partners, imaginal buddies, those that you can actually share this with? Because Neville would give this general advice of tell no man, but he would tell his wife about, and they would imagine together on a daily basis, various things, and partnerships like couples. There's all kinds of success stories that Neville would share that couples created their reality together. And so, what's to stop us from taking that? Because guess what? In lucid dreaming, there's research to show that there's a shared component in dreaming. Even though they're having their solo dream and they're going to sleep into their own dream, there's a shared component in even that. And so let's kind of explore that a little more. And this kind of connects to some questions I've seen honestly around free will. They say, okay, if I'm imagining changes in how someone else is treating me, am I violating their free will? No, because what did we do? We agreed before we came here. We agreed upon the shared dream in a way that invites different responses from other participants. And so when you're imagining changes in how others treat you or respond to you, know that you're not violating the free will. You are proposing an edit that is more harmonious and more coherent. So the more coherent and harmonious our edits become, the more it kind of makes sense to me that if we're in a shared dream construct, the more powerful they are. If you are trying to play some kind of experimental jazz music on the side and sort of seeing the rest of the world as separate from you, you can see what kind of cacophony and noise that could bring. But if we start to say, okay, I'm an awakened node, I know I'm dreaming with others, and I know that a shared dream can be more coherent and more beautifully orchestrated. I find that super encouraging. We're always honoring the agreement to dance together, to be part of the orchestra together. Whenever we're shifting in imagination, we're just proposing a change for more coherence. Okay. Neville sort of seemed to emphasize that you don't want to be forcing anything. He really focused on imaginal acts being as natural as possible. So this forced or artificial changes in your identity, he would say that that creates resistance in the shared dream and to play your natural role. So it's kind of like when your internal shifts are genuine and natural and you've imagined them enough times in the state akin to sleep so that they start to feel like a true memory, they start to integrate smoothly into the collective reality. And of course, Neville would say that yes, we're dreaming in concert, but the shared dream isn't permanent. In the lecture The Father, he explains that the dreamer is in what he called a remote region of the soul, meaning our true divine nature can't be destroyed by anything in this dream. We agreed to fall into limitation to experience every state of good and evil, but we will awaken. In Neville's words, we agreed to dream in concert to fall into these states and then come out of these states having experienced them. The entire shared dream is an experiment in consciousness. And so we chose this limitation to experience individuality, creative power, and that experiment is what we call in Brave Mystic training the simulation, the parameters of the simulation, and that we share. Hugo says, I feel the urge to also look at what is fully private then. The discussion naturally extends to this as a necessary implication, for shared implies unshared. It is not being a thing without its opposite. Ooh, I see what you mean. So, it's like a shared document that there is a collective. There certainly is a collective. And I don't think anything is hidden from each other. I don't think you can because we're one. However, it depends on what level you're talking about. We have private lives, obviously, at the level of the individuals. But depending on what edit access you have, I think, everyone's shared with everyone. Is that making sense, Hugo? But that's really interesting. You always have you really do have some fascinating insights to share. Thank you. I saw Orlena. Orlena, I've seen you type a few times, and I know that you might have had a question. I want to encourage you to ask your question if you have one, so that I can make sure that we're getting something out of the series that it's really landing, and that even if there are some things where we're confused about or we're trying to understand the research, that you can kind of see and be encouraged about Neville's fundamentals and kind of explore this waking reality more in a more dreamlike state than you did before, a more malleable way than you did before. Hugo says, I love mapping all of this. One thing leads to another. Yes. I seek the current research on the shared dreams, the mutual dreams, just beginning to hint at the mechanisms for this like waking dream. Studies show that when people are relaxed and open rather than trying to force outcomes, shared dreaming experiences are more likely. So it always goes back to that shared. It always goes back to that relaxed state, which I really find interesting. Okay. So I'm actually going to start to close this out because I want to. What I'm looking for now, what I'm going to do is within now and the next week, I'm going to gather all of the techniques we've talked about in the series, make sure that they're nicely documented and available for you in a guide that you can access on Discord, so that you can take a look at the techniques that we've gathered and adapted for waking reality that actually have some research to back this up. It's really cool. And then I will have some experiences I want to share, some stories of what this has done for me in my waking reality and how this has shifted my life, so that you can be inspired. And then I want to close it out with some questions that the next time we have the series, maybe the lucid dreaming, continuing like series, like part 2 series. When we do that for season 2, let's say, I will be able to dive deeper on tabs that we just started to open here, questions we just started to open and answer. So, looking forward to it. Thank you again for sharing your time, your precious time with me on your Fridays every single week, coming at this with open-mindedness and curiosity. And keep your eyes open for the shared guide, which will be ready probably a week from now, around the same time as the last episode. And as always, everyone, remember who you are, imagine wisely, and practice static into sleep. Thank you so much, and I will talk to you soon. See you next week.
You have just explored another layer of the dream. If it stirred something in you, don't rush to wake up. Let the symbols, the questions, the recognitions keep echoing. To integrate what you're discovering, join the School of Imagination on Discord. You'll find community, prompts, and the live voice stage where these episodes unfold. And if you're ready to go deeper into simulation mastery, state authorship, and the metaphysical training that rewires your reality, Brave Mystic training is now enrolling. Link in the description. Until next time, stay lucid, stay soft, stay sovereign. This is DreamLogic.